soccer now, where some fans say they're boycotting the upcoming World Cup games in the U.S. The local World Cup committee has been expecting hundreds of thousands of visitors to travel to the Metro when the matches kick off in 5 months.
Don, what we're seeing right now is when politics and global sports collide. We saw recently President Trump added 2 more soccer nations to the travel ban. Senegal and the Ivory Coast join the list of countries that are banned from coming to the United States. Iran and Haiti are the 2 others.
The 2026 FIFA World Cup is being sold as the biggest celebration in football history. 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 host nations, 16 cities. A tournament stretched across Canada, Mexico, and the United States on a scale FIFA has never attempted before. On paper, it looks like the ultimate triumph of global sport. A month-long festival of unity, spectacle, and shared humanity. But once you step beyond the branding, another question begins to take shape. Who is this World Cup really open to? Because the real drama surrounding the 2026 FIFA World Cup is not just about football, it is not just about who qualifies, it is not just about who lifts the trophy, and it is not even just about whether North America can deliver the biggest World Cup ever staged. The real drama is about power. It is about borders. It is about mobility. It is about who gets welcomed and who gets filtered. It is about how a tournament marketed as global can still be experienced through unequal passports, unequal access, and unequal political realities. That is where the story becomes much bigger than the game. Because a World Cup is never just a sporting event. A World Cup is also a performance of legitimacy. It tells the world what kind of host wants to be seen. It tells sponsors where to invest confidence. It tells governments how to package themselves to billions of viewers. And it tells ordinary people something even more basic. Whether they are expected to arrive as guests or processed first as risks. That contradiction sits at the center of the 2026 tournament. Officially, the message is smooth and reassuring. FIFA and the host authorities want the world to see readiness, openness, and celebration. The United States has worked with FIFA and the U.S. State Department on a visa facilitation pathway called FIFA Pass, designed to help eligible ticket holders seek priority interview appointments. But the same official guidance also makes something else very clear. A ticket does not guarantee entry. Fans still need the appropriate travel documents, and admission still depends on the visa and border system itself. And that is the first major truth people need to understand. The 2026 World Cup may be global in branding, but access to it is still filtered through state power. That means this tournament will not be experienced equally. A fan from a visa waiver country does not face the same pathway as a fan from a country dealing with longer waits, heavier scrutiny, or political tension with one of the hosts. That is not a side issue. That is part of the real story. Because when football is marketed as universal but access remains conditional, the contradiction becomes impossible to ignore. Football may belong to the world. Entry does not. And that is why this story has become so politically charged. Because once access becomes part of the conversation, the World Cup stops looking like a neutral sporting event and starts looking like a mirror of the international system itself. A system where some people move easily and others move under suspicion. A system where openness is celebrated in language but filtered in practice. A system where global unity sounds beautiful on television, but often collides with borders, geopolitics, and hierarchy in real life. That is the drama most headlines only touch briefly, but it is the one that matters most. And nowhere is that contradiction more visible than in the questions surrounding Iran. In late November 2025, Reuters reported that Iran initially said it would boycott the final draw in Washington over visa issues before later attending. Now, in March 2026, Reuters is again reporting uncertainty around Iran's participation, with FIFA monitoring the situation amid conflict in the Middle East while U.S. President Donald Trump publicly said he did not care whether Iran played or not. That is not a normal backdrop for a supposedly universal sporting celebration. Now pause on that for a moment, because the issue here is not just Iran by itself. The issue is what the Iran question reveals. It reveals how quickly the language of universality starts to bend when a qualified team exists inside active geopolitical confrontation. FIFA likes to present the World Cup as belonging equally to everyone. But when one of the participating nations is entangled in war, sanctions, or diplomatic hostility involving one of the host powers, the ideal of equal belonging begins to look fragile. And when equal belonging becomes conditional, what you have is not universality. What you have is hierarchy. That is the deeper truth the tournament is exposing. Because the 2026 World Cup is not only about football governance, it is about the world system football must operate inside. It is about how global spectacle depends on institutions that still answer to states, markets, and security logics. It is about how FIFA can speak the language of inclusion while still relying on border regimes it does not control. It is about how commercial events claim neutrality while unfolding inside deeply unequal political terrain. In other words, the 2026 World Cup is not outside politics. It is built inside politics. And then there is the commercial layer, which makes the whole thing even more revealing. This is the biggest World Cup FIFA has ever staged. FIFA's official materials describe it as a record-setting tournament, with more than 6 million tickets expected to be available and a massive match calendar extending from the 11th of June to the 19th of July, 2026. This is not just a sporting event. It is a commercial machine built around broadcasters, sponsors, tourism, logistics, and prestige. Events of that scale do not respond calmly to uncertainty. They try to manage it. They try to absorb it. They try to keep the image stable even when the underlying tensions are not. That is why official caution matters. Not because silence automatically proves conspiracy, but because silence often tells you what institutions are not comfortable confronting directly. Reuters reported today that FIFA's chief operating officer said the tournament is too big to be postponed by the Middle East conflict. That statement says a lot. It says the size of the event has become part of its political armor. It says continuity matters so much that even major regional instability is being framed as something the tournament must simply move through. And once something becomes too big to stop, it becomes even more important to ask what exactly it is protecting. Because then the issue is no longer just football. The issue becomes governance without full accountability. The issue becomes spectacle protected by scale. The issue becomes whether a global event can still claim moral legitimacy when the people meant to animate it do not all encounter it under the same conditions. And that matters because FIFA is not simply organizing matches. It is staging a global narrative about belonging, openness, and celebration. If that narrative clashes too sharply with lived experience, the contradiction will define the tournament before the football does. That is how legitimacy crises are born. And then there is the North American comparison built into this entire event. This tournament is spread across 3 countries: Canada, Mexico, the United States. That means the 2026 World Cup is also a live comparison of 3 border systems, 3 political cultures, and 3 experiences of entry and welcome. Officially, FIFA's published schedule remains heavily U.S.-centered, with 78 matches in the United States and 13 each in Canada and Mexico. The opening match is set for Mexico City, and the final is scheduled for New York, New Jersey Stadium on the 19th of July, 2026. So the viral claim that FIFA secretly stripped the U.S. of huge parts of the tournament is not supported by the official schedule. But the comparison between the hosts is still real, and people will read that comparison in real time. Because every supporter, every team delegation, every journalist, and every viewer will be measuring something larger than stadiums. They will be measuring hospitality, predictability, access, dignity. They will be asking which parts of this North American mega event actually feel open, and which parts feel filtered through fear, scrutiny, and state power. And once that question enters the conversation, football alone can no longer contain it. That is when the tournament starts to mean something bigger. So what do people actually need to know right now? First, some of the most viral narratives around the 2026 World Cup have been exaggerated. The official baseline is clear. The tournament format, host cities, and match schedule are already set by FIFA, and the US remains the main host by match count. Second, the underlying political contradiction is real. This World Cup is exposing how global sport depends on systems of visas, borders, and geopolitical power that are anything but equal. FIFA can market universality, but it cannot erase the unequal realities through which people approach the tournament. Third, the biggest immediate issue may not be a formal boycott. It may be something deeper and more difficult to measure. A crisis of confidence. Confidence in access. Confidence in welcome. Confidence that football's universal language will actually match the lived experience of the people trying to enter the spectacle. And fourth, the 2026 FIFA World Cup is already revealing something much larger about the world we live in. A world where even the most celebrated global events are not above politics. They are built inside politics, inside war, inside sanctions, inside unequal passports, inside border regimes, inside commercial imperatives, inside relationships of power that decide who moves easily, who gets delayed, and who is expected to prove they belong before they even arrive. That is the real drama behind FIFA World Cup 2026. So by the time the first ball is kicked in Mexico City on the 11th of June 2026, the political meaning of this tournament will already be in motion. Not because football failed, but because football was never isolated from the world around it in the first place. The 2026 World Cup is not only asking who will win on the pitch, it is asking who gets to belong in the spectacle at all. And that is a much bigger question than football. If this breakdown gave you a deeper frame than the usual sports headlines, subscribe to Liberation Lens. Here, we do not stop at the event. We expose the system behind it.